Hi, I'm Mike Giambattista. I'm publisher of The Customer, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Brian Walker, who is Chief Strategy Officer with Bloomreach. And if you're not familiar with Bloomreach, you probably need to be. I'm sure you're familiar with the effects of their work, but I read an interesting stat on your site this morning, Brian, that Bloomreach powers something like 25% of e-commerce between the US and UK, which is a phenomenal statistic. And that's just a big deal. But I think, other than being just a really cool thing and shows how powerful your technology really is, it also gives you a perspective that I think not a lot of people have. So that was my really long way of saying I'm really grateful that we're talking right now, and welcome.
Well, it's my pleasure, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So maybe you could do a better job than I did about telling us what Bloomreach is and what you do.
Yeah, Bloomreach is a commerce experience solution set. So we provide solutions that help businesses drive and optimize their digital commerce experience. We do that with a range of different products that all come together and kind of unify around what we call our commerce data platform. But essentially, we power marketing solutions for customers, how they drive email marketing, text messaging, social marketing, and so forth. Highly personalized, and kind of enable our customers to aggregate lots of different types of customer data and get very granular at how they message and communicate to their customers. Right message, right offer, right time, so to speak. And then we provide a range of solutions that help kind of inspire and engage customers and ultimately help them convert with optimization around our search technology, product recommendations, a whole host of online merchandising tools and content solutions that help marketers and merchants, drive a relevant, personalized, and engaging experience. So Bloomreach is all about powering and enabling digital commerce, and we work with a range of different businesses across lots of different verticals. We tend to work with what we'd call like kind of emerging brands who are really growing rapidly online. Very large established players. Yeah.
I'm just sorry to trample on you there. I'm interested. Are you able to talk about any of the brands you're working with, to name any of those people?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of brands. I mean, we've got a lot of case studies out there on the website. We work with brands like Puma. We work with businesses like Staples and Williams-Sonoma. We work with some B2B businesses as well, like MSC and HD Supply. And we do some business in the travel and financial services market as well. Capital One would be a well-known financial services brand that we work with, or Amex, for example. So we work with primarily businesses that are looking to engage and drive their business through their digital channels, working direct with their consumers or B2B customers as well.
Okay. So as I mentioned when we first started this conversation, your company powers something like 25% of e-commerce between US and UK, which gives you, I think it says a handful of things. It talks an awful lot about your scale and abilities, but I think probably more interesting for the people that are watching and listening to this are your perspective, because there aren't a whole lot of people out there that get to see what you see. So would love to get your thoughts on what do you see for holiday season? Why do you see some of the things you're seeing and predicting? Because there's so many different factors at play right now. Yeah. New factors that have never been around before. So love to hear your thoughts on that. And here we are, early November, just kind of crossing into usually the hectic season, but all kind of wondering now, will it be hectic or won't it? So
yeah, well, I think there's many people who have said it in the past, right? Predictions and forecasts are particularly hard when they're especially when they're about the future, right? So certainly true. I think, when we started looking at this well back in Q3 and kind of looking at what we were expecting to see this holiday season, what we saw was that the baseline of digital commerce was still year over year up significantly from the previous year. So obviously we're all very familiar with the story around the inflection point that digital and e-commerce experienced due to the pandemic, right? Sure. with many different product categories, growing significantly. Many consumers who are somewhat still on the sidelines or who hadn't really gone like full digital in a sense, right? We're forced to in many ways, and certainly some of the challenges around locating supply of PPE and other essential products also drove consumers to try a lot of additional brands. So we've seen, a real reshuffling also occur in terms of brand loyalty and brand preference, all kind of driven by the pandemic as well. But when we look at the baseline of consumer behavior, we're still well above pre-pandemic levels, right? We're about 25% above pre-pandemic levels in terms of consumers leveraging the web and online channels. And certainly we saw that in the Bloomreach data as well, right? Continuing to trend well above 2020. So we're annualizing the pandemic peak, if you will, as we were progressing through 2021. And so, our forecast looking at holiday season was quite bullish based on that, and pretty far, I'd say, bullish in relative to other forecasts that were out in the marketplace as well. And we were forecasting a 30% growth year over year in holiday online sales.
Wow,
Now,
wow, that's a big deal. A
it's
lot
a
of
big
people
deal. Yeah,
excited to hear about
absolutely. And that's actually because we were seeing, year over year numbers in the low 40s, trending into Q3. So continued strong growth in digital channels. The reality is we are facing a really challenging period though in the marketplace, and there's a lot, as you said, a lot of different dynamics that could end up impacting, where we ultimately end up. And some of those have a lot less to do with kind of consumer, behavior, and a lot to do with inventory availability and
Sure.
consumer
Yeah,
sentiment and a whole host of other things. So we'll have to see, obviously, where it all kind of comes out in the wash. But as you said, there's a lot of different factors that may ultimately impact where we end up. And there's a lot of downstream sort of impacts we're all seeing in the market, whether you're running or involved in a digital business today or just as a consumer. You're probably already experiencing. I mean, we've just turned the clock on Halloween and rolling into early November now. But holiday, of course, is now in full swing and
yeah.
has been for some time. And certainly retailers are interested in moving demand forward for a whole host of reasons. And consumers are, kind of responding in part due to the news cycle and other factors.
So, we haven't, but we should touch on supply chain issues. It seems to me, especially based on your forecast, if you're saying or looking ahead towards a 30% growth, that's no small thing. But call that the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. When those forces collide, what is that going to mean for consumers? And again, you're probably in a great position to advise brands on how they navigate those tricky waters, because it's going
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to look at a couple of different compounding factors and realize that supply chain is certainly one of them. If the inventory is not already landed in the U.S. and it's not already kind of into the distribution network, it's going to be very hard to catch it back up, right, and catch the demand before we hit early December. You also got to factor in the labor crunch that many retailers and our logistics providers are also experiencing, and recognize that it's also a challenge with in-store staff or warehouse staff or staff to do the processing and delivering and moving of goods, right? Everything from a shortage of truck drivers and delivery people to warehouse workers and in-store workers. So a lot of businesses are struggling to just, have the workforce in place and trained to process this like increased volume of business. So I think what we're going to see here, and we're going to start seeing the messaging already, but even more so over the next few weeks, is really stores encouraging curbside or in-store pickup. And for consumers, it's a great way to do a lot of my shopping online, which now I'm much more comfortable with. And certainly when it comes to finding hard to find goods, it's way more convenient, obviously, to be doing that online. But you're going to start seeing, in-store pickup and curbside pickup become a real norm. For a consumer, it's very convenient, right? I get to schedule, or I'm making a trip when I know the product is there and my time is precious, right? And certainly with the return to work still kind of progressing slowly in many different regions and locations in the country. Many workers are still working remote largely, if not full time, certainly part time. Even our routines as consumers have been kind of disrupted. So curbside pickup and in-store pickup become much more convenient. I know if I'm going to get in the car or I'm going to make that journey, the product's there for me to pick up. And I've yet saved time, maybe even saved some money by shopping online. We will see, certainly less discounting activity, I think, than we've historically seen. That's a good thing, I think, for a lot of retailers and brands who, for many years, right, have tried to wean themselves and the consumers away from heavy discounting, which often, comes into play during the holiday season. We're going to see a little less of that. That's actually kind of a healthy thing, and so margins are actually better. So even though inventories are down, and that, that's going to be a constraint on how much business you can do, you're transacting at a higher margin than you would have, in the past. So that's a positive thing. So we're going to see a lot of these different kinds of dynamics playing out really over the course of November and into early December. And I think for retailers, they're trying to, encourage early shopping.
Yeah.
They're strongly signaling to consumers, even putting it up on their home pages, that they should buy now, right? Don't wait. That if they want to have the gifts in time for holiday, now is the time. So strong signaling from the retailers. It's obviously in the news cycle. Consumers are starting to respond pretty aggressively to that. So our holiday peak is moving earlier and getting kind of flatter, if you will, versus that steep inflection point we would typically see with Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and into early December. So it's a lot of different things there, but those are some of the impacts we're going to see.
Interesting that you brought that up, because even in this morning's Wall Street Journal, one of the front page articles had to do with holiday shopping and what consumers need to be dealing with right now.
Mhm.
And just almost verbatim what you just said: either buy it now while it's available when you see it, or get an inventory tracker
Yeah,
that you can
I
look at
know.
and hope for the best. At that point, it's kind of like one of these things.
Pretty interesting. I kind of laughed a little bit at the article because it was sort of like, steering consumers towards trying to hack the system.
Right.
And I think around, certain high demand products, I could certainly see a few consumers doing that, but that's going to be relatively few consumers who are going to try to do it. Retailers are wrestling with bots and aggregators, people buying product with intention to resell it, brands kind of losing some brand control, and retailers actually seeing, their inventory basically being gobbled up early by resellers who are trying to resell some of this product on, marketplaces and eBay and so forth. And I think that's just really interesting. Not long-term sustainable trend, but something that we are seeing now,
Yeah.
really in relation to the supply chain crunch and lack of inventory in some product categories.
I would love to get your thoughts on the meaning and value of Black Friday in these times, because it is different than what it was 2, 3 years ago. Vastly different. Those dynamics have changed and flip-flopped and become less and more important kind of simultaneously. So
Well, let's just maybe in on a thought on that. I mean, everyone here may realize that, the term Black Friday was related to, retailers likely going from red to black on their balance sheets based on the inflection of sales at that time. And certainly the retail industry over the past, say, 50 to 100 years really put a lot of emphasis on driving demand, right after Thanksgiving in the US. And that, of course, has now kind of become an international phenomenon in some ways. But just think about the consumer behavior and look back at that. I remember working in stores like when I was in college and so forth, and having people lined up in the parking lot the morning after Thanksgiving, and just the frenzy and the chaos. And I can say that most consumers are not interested in that, let alone that we're in a pandemic still, in a sense, right? And so, that peak of demand and sort of the frenzy that retailers would sort of try to encourage, like that doesn't really have the same impact anymore. And now you're really trying to moderate that kind of demand across, many different weeks, if not months, and really enable your organization to respond effectively and meet the customer promise. And certainly that in-store experience that was Black Friday, frankly, I don't think most consumers are very interested in going back to that. And so, in a sense, Black Friday marks a point on the calendar. And certainly, these kinds of shopping holidays are important in some respects in the retail calendar, but it is less important. And I'll say that there's another online shopping holiday that is starting to kind of become more present in kind of Western markets, US and in Europe, for example, and that's Singles Day, which of course started in China essentially as a created shopping holiday. It'll probably be our second biggest peak of shopping in the US market now.
Wow, that's a big deal.
So that's a big deal. And so it's really about, retailers, right, kind of pushing demand into those days. And it's about, their marketing and merchandising strategies kind of converging on these key points in the calendar to capture and drive intent and demand. And, so we're seeing kind of a moderation of that over the course of a few months. And Black Friday, as you said, is much less important than it used to be.
Yeah, marks a day on the calendar when the frenzy officially begins, I suppose. It's a different kind of frenzy now. In any case, Brian, thank you so much for your time, for your thinking, for your perspective. I personally just love these kinds of conversations. I hope we can do it again frequently. Your perspective is valuable to our readers and viewers. So again, thanks.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.